There exists a nation at the very core of Europe that, upon first glance, appears as though it was conceived by someone who never once settled for anything less than flawless. Its mountain ranges are excessively grand. Its bodies of water are unnaturally calm. Its urban centers are excessively immaculate. And yet, it is completely authentic. Switzerland. A country of just over 9 million inhabitants, positioned between France, Germany, Italy, and Austria, and quietly regarded by a significant portion of the globe as one of the finest locations on the planet, not merely to visit, but to inhabit. And what does that truly signify? What does it feel like to open your eyes here each morning? To bring up children in this environment? To earn a living here? To disagree with your neighbors here? To age here? That is the inquiry this presentation will address. Because Switzerland is not a picture-perfect image. It is a way of thinking. A social agreement unlike any other existing on Earth. And the more time you invest within it, the more difficult it becomes to turn away. Over the following half hour, we will traverse the valleys and the urban centers. We will take seats at kitchen tables, traverse mountain passes, and track the cadence of day-to-day existence from the northern reaches to the southern, from the eastern borders to the western, across 4 distinct languages and 4 centuries of human experience. This is not a narrative about Switzerland's history. It is a narrative about its current reality. About the millions of individuals, both native Swiss and foreign-born, who deliberately opt to call this land their home. And the more closely you examine it, the more you comprehend the reasons behind that choice. Before you can grasp how people exist in Switzerland, you must first understand the environment in which they exist. Because geography here is not merely a backdrop, it is fundamental. Switzerland rests at the precise center of the European landmass, sharing borders with 5 nations and molded by geological forces that have been operating for tens of millions of years. The Alps, the immense mountain chain that defines so much of Swiss existence, occupy roughly 60% of the nation's total land area. These are not gentle slopes. They are walls of rock and frozen water that soar above 4,000 meters and stay covered in snow for the majority of the year. Above the settlement of Zermatt in the Valais canton, the Matterhorn rises in solitary splendor against the sky. A peak of nearly flawless shape that has become the most captured on film mountain in the world. But it is not even the highest summit. That distinction belongs to the Dufourspitze. A peak so distant and so indifferent to human aspirations that most Swiss citizens will complete their lives without ever setting foot at its base. Traveling northward from Zermatt through the deep valley of Graubünden, the largest Swiss canton, the mountains progressively soften. The valleys expand. Rivers run with greater force. The terrain starts to exhale. By the time you arrive at the shores of Lake Lucerne in the nation's very center, the Alps remain visible on every horizon, but they no longer confine, they outline. They welcome. And the city of Lucerne, with its timber bridge and its walkways along the water, sits within that framing like something composed rather than constructed. Further north still lies the Swiss plateau, referred to in German as the Mittelland. This expansive, gently rolling plain extends from Geneva in the southwest to the shores of Lake Constance in the northeast. It is here that the majority of Swiss residents make their homes. Cities such as Zurich, Bern, Basel, and Winterthur all lie within this zone. And it is here that the economic and cultural pulse of the country beats most strongly and rapidly. Then, beyond the Alps to the south, the landscape transforms entirely. The canton of Ticino slopes downward toward the Italian lakes, and the climate softens into something warm and radiant. The city of Lugano, its pale architecture reflected in still blue water, might easily be mistaken for northern Italy. In numerous respects, culturally speaking, it is. The climate of Switzerland is as diverse as its terrain. A winter morning in Zurich can bring overcast skies and freezing mist that lingers for days. That same morning in Lugano might offer pale, bright sunshine. In the high passes of Graubünden, temperatures can plummet to 20 degrees below zero. In the Valais canton, the Föhn, a warm, dry wind that descends from the Alps, can push temperatures into the 20s during early spring. For those who reside here, this is not merely weather, it is a relationship. The seasons in Switzerland do not pass quietly. They arrive with full. A typical day in Switzerland commences early. In Zurich, commuters begin filling train platforms before 7 o'clock in the morning. The Swiss Federal Railways, known as the SBB, runs one of the most punctual railway networks anywhere on Earth. A train that arrives 3 minutes late is genuinely considered delayed in Switzerland, and this is not a joke, it is an accepted standard. That precision is not confined to transportation. It extends through nearly every aspect of daily life. In Basel, shops open at designated hours and close at designated hours. Lunch breaks are observed seriously, often taking a full hour, taken at home or at a dining table, never at a work desk. Sunday is honored as a legitimate day of rest. In most shared residential buildings, doing laundry on Sunday is prohibited. Mowing your lawn in the early morning is not allowed. After 10 o'clock at night, silence is not merely a preference, it is a social duty. These regulations are not perceived as limitations by the majority of Swiss people. They are experienced as acts of neighborliness. The social contract here is founded on one central conviction. Your freedom to act as you wish ends precisely where another person's tranquility begins. In Bern, the capital, daily life progresses at a somewhat more unhurried pace than in Zurich. The streets are more medieval, the scale more human, the atmosphere more contemplative. Government employees, and Bern hosts the headquarters of numerous federal institutions, tend to value a steady rhythm over haste. In Geneva, the daily rhythm is influenced by the city's exceptional international character, hosting the United Nations, the International Red Cross, and over 300 international organizations. Geneva is home to a transient population of diplomats, aid workers, and global professionals from every corner of the globe. Walk along the Rue de Rive in the morning, and you will hear conversations in 10 different languages before reaching the street's end. In Lugano and throughout the Ticino canton, the day follows a different pattern. Lunch is longer. Afternoons carry a warmth, both literal and social, that softens the edges of the timetable. The boundary between work hours and personal hours feels somewhat more flexible here than in the north. And in the villages, in the valley farms of Graubünden, in the mountain towns of Appenzell, in the agricultural communities of the Bernese Oberland, the daily pattern follows nature more closely than any clock. Animals attended at dawn. Fields worked through the morning. The cadence is older, quieter, and in many ways more genuine. What unites all of these rhythms across all of these places is a shared understanding of what time is intended for. The Swiss do not hurry because they fear falling behind. They move with accuracy because they have collectively determined that accuracy is a form of respect for others and for themselves. The home in Switzerland is one of the most private spaces in Europe. Unlike in many other cultures, where front doors remain open and neighbors drop by without notice, Swiss domestic existence unfolds behind closed doors. Privacy here is not a sign of coldness, it is a deeply held value. Your home is your territory, and it is treated accordingly by everyone around you. In Zurich, the majority of residents rent rather than own. This surprises many people who assume that one of the wealthiest nations in the world must also be a nation of homeowners. In fact, Switzerland has one of the lowest homeownership rates in all of Europe. The reasons are structural. Property prices are extraordinarily high, and the rental market is well regulated, stable, and legally protected. Renting is not a temporary arrangement. For most urban Swiss families, it is simply how life is organized. A typical apartment in Zurich or Geneva is modest by international standards, though maintained with a level of cleanliness that would be considered exceptional almost anywhere else. Shared spaces, laundry rooms, bicycle cellars, entrance halls, are governed by house rules that every tenant receives upon signing their lease. These rules are followed. In smaller cities and in the countryside, the relationship to home shifts. In a village in the Fribourg canton, a family might live in a farmhouse that has carried their name for 3 generations. The house grows slowly, a new room when a child arrives, a renovated kitchen when finances permit. These homes carry memory within their walls. Family life in Switzerland tends to be intimate in scale. Swiss families are smaller than the European historical average. Many couples have 1 or 2 children. Grandparents are respected and involved, but rarely under the same roof in urban areas. The family unit is close, but not entangled. In rural areas, especially in the Bernese Emmental with its distinctive longhouse farms where family, livestock, and storage once shared the same long structure, multi-generational living remains more common. The farm holds the family together in a way that the city rarely can. Childcare is a genuine concern across the country. With 2 working parents now the norm in most Swiss households, the cost and availability of childcare generates constant debate, particularly in Zurich and Geneva, where it ranks among the most expensive in the world. In many communities, Swiss primary schools still operate on a traditional split-day schedule. Children come home for lunch, then return to school in the afternoon. This shapes the working day of parents profoundly. Life behind the door in Switzerland, whether in a Zurich apartment or a high valley farmhouse in Graubünden, carries a particular quality. There is warmth here, though it takes time to reach it. There is order, though it never tips into coldness. And there is, ultimately, a feeling that the home is not just where you live, it is the center of everything that matters. Food in Switzerland is a story told in 4 languages, across 26 cantons, with recipes borrowed from 5 neighboring countries and a precision of preparation that should by now surprise no one. But what is Swiss food truly? In the German-speaking regions around Zurich, Winterthur, and the broad towns of the Mittelland, the cuisine is hearty and grounded. Rösti is perhaps the most iconic dish of German Switzerland, a thick golden cake of fried grated potato that appears on breakfast and dinner tables alike. It is food that makes sense in a cold climate at altitude after a long day of physical work. Simple, honest, and deeply satisfying. In Basel, the food culture has long been shaped by the city's position at the junction of 3 countries. Pastries that carry the influence of France, sausages that recall Germany, and a civic pride in the local market that is entirely Swiss. The Baseler Wochenmarkt, held beneath the red sandstone facade of the city hall in the Marktplatz, is one of the most vivid food experiences in the country. In the French-speaking West, in Geneva, Lausanne, and the wine country around the town of Neuchâtel, the culinary tradition leans toward France. Meals here are longer, more deliberate, more conversational. Local wines are taken seriously and discussed with a fluency that reflects generations of careful attention. Fondue, that most internationally famous of Swiss dishes, was born precisely in this borderland between German and French Switzerland. And what it represents is perhaps more important than what it contains: a communal pot, shared bread, a long evening at a table. These are not just customs, they are a philosophy of togetherness that crosses every language line in Switzerland. In the south, in Lugano and across the Ticino, the table is Italian in spirit. Risotto and polenta, grilled fish from the lake, and espresso taken standing at a bar. The food here feels lighter, warmer, and effortlessly social in a way that the north rarely matches. And then, there is cheese and chocolate, the 2 Swiss exports that need no introduction anywhere on earth. Switzerland produces hundreds of varieties of cheese. Gruyere from the medieval town of the same name, Emmental from the valley of the same name with its famous holes. Raclette from the mountain communities of the Valais. Each is a product of its place, of the specific grass, the specific altitude, the specific culture of the people who make it. Swiss chocolate follows the same logic. In small workshops across the country and in the great factories of companies whose names appear on shelves around the world, the craft is treated as something close to a sacred obligation. The tempering, the sourcing, the patience. Quality is not a marketing claim here, it is a minimum standard. Culturally, Switzerland is quieter in its greatness than many of its neighbors. It does not proclaim its cultural achievements loudly, it builds them. Basel's Art Basel has become the world's most prestigious contemporary art fair. Montreux on the shores of Lake Geneva hosts one of the world's great jazz festivals every summer. Lausanne is the Olympic capital, home to the International Olympic Committee and the Olympic Museum. These are not accidents. They are the expression of a culture that values excellence, quiet, patient, and enduring excellence, above almost everything else. Switzerland's economy is, by almost any measure, extraordinary. It is consistently ranked among the most competitive economies on Earth. Its GDP per capita ranks among the highest anywhere in the world. Its unemployment rate is one of the lowest in Europe. And it has achieved all of this while remaining outside the European Union, a fact that economists have studied, debated, and never fully explained. In Zurich, the banking and financial sector drives enormous wealth. The Bahnhofstrasse, the long boulevard that runs from the central train station down to the lake, is not lined with luxury boutiques, as tourists sometimes expect. It is lined with the offices of private banks. This is one of the greatest concentrations of financial capital on Earth. And the city carries that weight with characteristic discretion. But Switzerland is far more than a banking nation. Around Basel, the pharmaceutical and chemical industry employs tens of thousands of people. Novartis, Roche, and Syngenta, companies whose products touch daily life in nearly every country on Earth, are all headquartered within a few kilometers of each other in Basel's metropolitan area. These are not just factories, they are ecosystems of research, development, and global reach. In the Jura Mountains and around the city of Neuchâtel, the watchmaking industry defines an entire regional identity. Switzerland produces roughly 2/3 of the world's watch exports by value. The names that appear on those dials, Rolex in Geneva, IWC in Schaffhausen, Omega in Biel, Patek Philippe back in Geneva, represent something beyond engineering. They represent a commitment to making things that outlast the person who made them. The working culture in Switzerland is professional and rigorous, but respectful of personal time in a way that many working cultures are not. A meeting that runs past 6 o'clock in the evening is unusual. Annual leave is generous by global standards, typically 4 to 5 weeks. Productivity is expected and consistently delivered, but not at the expense of the life being lived alongside it. Salaries in Switzerland are high, but everything else is, too. A software engineer in Zurich may earn more than their counterpart in London or Amsterdam, but their rent will also be higher. Their grocery bill will be higher. Their health insurance, which is private, mandatory, and a significant monthly cost, will claim a substantial portion of that income. Life in Switzerland is not a free pass. It is an economic contract that demands high performance on all sides. And yet, for those who enter that contract fully, it works. Consistently, measurably, year after year, it works. Switzerland is often described as reserved, and it is true that the Swiss do not open easily to strangers. First names are not offered immediately. Small talk does not flow the way it does in southern cultures. A neighbor you have lived beside for 2 years may still greet you formally. But this is not distance, it is a different architecture of closeness. In Appenzell, one of the most traditional and most fiercely independent cantons in the country, something remarkable still takes place each spring. Citizens gather in the open air in the town square for the Landsgemeinde. They stand together under the sky, and decisions of local governance are made by a show of hands. It is the oldest form of direct democracy in continuous practice anywhere in the world. And it is approached with an absolute seriousness by every person present. This is Switzerland at its most fundamental. A society that takes collective responsibility seriously enough to stand in the rain and vote with their raised hand. In Lucerne, the Fastnacht, the great carnival that erupts every February, transforms the usually composed city into 3 days of drums, masks, and controlled chaos. The floats are political and satirical. The costumes are elaborate and ancient in their symbolism. And the people of Lucerne, who plan it for months, surrender to it entirely when the moment comes. In Zurich, the Sechselaut in each April marks the end of winter by burning the Bug, a large snowman effigy stuffed with fireworks, in the city's main square. By tradition, the speed at which the Bowog's head explodes predicts the quality of the coming summer. The Swiss receive this forecast with a mixture of genuine hope and gentle irony. They understand, better than most, the gap between what we wish for and what the sky decides. Across all 4 linguistic regions, the 1st of August, Switzerland's National Day, brings the whole country together. Bonfires are lit on hilltops. Fireworks break over every major lake. In small villages, speeches are made about independence, neutrality, and the covenant between the Swiss people and their unique form of government. The speeches are often short. The sentiment behind them is always completely sincere. Outside of festivals, social life in Switzerland tends to be organized around clubs and associations. The Verein system, particularly strong in German-speaking regions, provides an extraordinary range of community groups: hiking clubs, shooting clubs, yodeling clubs, singing societies, sports associations. These are not hobbies, they are social infrastructure. And for newcomers to Switzerland, joining a local club is often the most genuine path into the community, not through proximity, but through shared effort. Friendship in Switzerland, once made, tends to be deep and lasting. The walls take time to come down, but once they do, what is behind them is something that most people, wherever they come from, recognize as rare and worth keeping. To live in Switzerland is not to live without difficulty. The country's extraordinary standard of living carries costs that are not only financial, though those are significant and constant. The cost of living is the most immediately visible challenge. In Geneva, a family of 4 can easily spend 8,000 Swiss francs a month before saving a single franc. Rent in Zurich for a modest 3-bedroom apartment regularly exceeds 3,000 francs. Eating out, even at a simple neighborhood restaurant, is an occasion that most Swiss families reserve for special evenings. The supermarkets are good, but even the discount chains here sit above the European average in price. Healthcare is mandatory and private. Every resident of Switzerland, Swiss citizen or foreign national, must purchase their own health insurance. Monthly premiums for a single adult in Zurich can reach 500 francs or more, depending on age and policy. The quality of Swiss healthcare is undeniable, but the financial pressure it places on individuals, particularly those on lower incomes, is a growing and genuine political concern. Integration is another layer of complexity. Switzerland has one of the highest proportions of foreign-born residents in Europe. Approximately 27% of the population was born outside the country. In a society that values tradition and where local belonging is earned slowly, finding a genuine place takes time and patience and a willingness to be misunderstood before you are understood. In cities like Geneva and Zurich, the international and Swiss populations can sometimes exist in parallel, working together, living near each other, but rarely fully intertwined. The language barrier is real. In Zurich, you are expected to speak Swiss German, or at least High German, to be taken seriously in daily life. In Geneva, French is essential. And across both cities, cultural assumptions can create distances that no salary package resolves. In smaller towns and rural communities, in a village in the canton of Solothurn, or in a farming community in the Aargau, this feeling can intensify. A family that arrived from abroad 2 decades ago may still be considered by some as newcomers. This is not overt hostility. Switzerland is, by any international standard, a safe and lawful country. But belonging is something that is cultivated across generations here, not assigned at the border. And then there is the pressure of the standard itself, the relentless precision, the structured days, the rules and rosters and expectations, all of which make Switzerland so functional, but which can, for some people, feel at times like living inside a mechanism rather than a community. These tensions are real. They are part of the honest picture. And acknowledging them does not diminish what is extraordinary about this country, it simply makes the picture complete. Switzerland is one of the rare places in the world where the ancient and the contemporary do not merely coexist, they actively shape each other. In Zurich, the Langstrasse quarter, once among the roughest districts in the city, has spent the last 2 decades transforming into one of Europe's most energetic creative neighborhoods. Designers, artists, software engineers, and chefs now inhabit buildings that were never intended for them. The city allowed this change to happen without erasing the past. The architecture is the same. The life inside it is entirely new. In the canton of Graubünden, the Romansh language, a direct descendant of Vulgar Latin, spoken today by fewer than 30,000 people, is still taught in schools, still used in official government documents, still passed from parent to child in mountain villages where the same family names appear in church records going back 500 years. Graubünden is, in this sense, a living archive, a place that has decided, consciously and collectively, that some things are too old and too important to lose. In Bern, the city's medieval center is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Lauben, the covered arcaded walkways that run for 6 kilometers through the old town, are a medieval invention that still functions today as the city's primary pedestrian infrastructure. People walk beneath these arches with phones in hand, sheltered from rain by stone columns built centuries before electricity existed. The tension between old and new is felt most acutely in the Swiss relationship to technology. Switzerland is, by most measures, a highly innovative country. The ETH Zurich and the EPFL in Lausanne rank consistently among the world's top universities. Swiss pharmaceutical and engineering companies invest billions each year in research. And yet, many Swiss people still pay with cash, still repair their appliances rather than replace them, still carry their children up to the same mountain pasture every summer that their grandparents walked to with their cattle. This is not nostalgia, it is discernment. In Lausanne, where the startup scene has grown dramatically over the last decade, young Swiss engineers are building technologies that will reach every corner of the globe. But in the evenings, they hike. They sit by the lake. They take the fondue pot down from the shelf and stay at the table for 3 hours. They know, in a way that many of their counterparts in faster cities do not, when to stop. That knowledge, that capacity to be still, that refusal to mistake speed for progress, this may be the most valuable thing that Switzerland, in all its precision and all its beauty, has managed to preserve. At some point, almost everyone who lives in Switzerland asks themselves the same question: why'd I stay? The answer is rarely simple, but it is always felt. For families in the Bernese Oberland, in the long valleys where the same surnames appear on mailboxes and graveyards and school registers across generations, the answer is written into the stone of the farmhouse wall. Staying is not a choice, it is a continuity. The farm exists because they stayed, and they stay because the farm exists. For the tens of thousands of international professionals who came to Geneva or Zurich on a 2-year contract and found themselves still there a decade later, the answer is harder to name. They came for the salary and the stability. They stayed because their children put down roots in the schoolyard, because the streets felt genuinely safe at every hour in every season, because the lake did not lose its power to astonish, no matter how many times they walked past it. For the farmers of Valais, who still drive their cattle up to the summer pastures every June in the ceremony known as the Alpazug, a procession of bells and flowers and ancient unironic pride. The answer is in the air itself. The clean thin air of altitude, the silence that settles over the valley when the last cow crosses the pass and the cowbells fade. There is no equivalent of this feeling in any city in the world. In St. Moritz, one of the world's most exclusive resort towns, the people who live there year-round know something that the visitors never quite reach. The mountain looks different when it belongs to you. When you have seen it through every season, when you have watched it in storm, in silence, in the flat gray light of a winter afternoon, and in the extraordinary gold of an autumn morning, it is not a destination anymore. It is simply home. And home in Switzerland is a concept that carries more weight than almost anywhere else. The German-speaking Swiss have a word for it, Heimat. It does not translate directly into English. It does not mean simply the house on your street or the country listed on your passport. It means the landscape you carry inside yourself, the particular quality of late afternoon light in your valley in autumn, which is not quite like the light anywhere else on earth. The sound of a specific church bell. The smell of a specific season. The feeling of standing in a specific place and knowing, without being able to say exactly why, that you belong there. It is this Heimat, that holds people in Switzerland. Not the efficiency, not the salaries, not the mountains, though the mountains are extraordinary. What keeps people here is something rarer and harder to build. The feeling, which the modern world makes increasingly difficult to find, that the life you are living is the one you were meant to live. That the ground beneath you is the right ground. That you are in the right place. And for those who find it, Swiss-born or newly arrived, in the mountains of Graubünden, or beside the lake in Lugano, or on a quiet street in Bern at 7 o'clock in the morning, it is a feeling that does not fade with time. It deepens with it. And that is the most Swiss thing of all. Switzerland is extraordinary, but it is also human. It has costs and contradictions and silences that take years to understand. If this presentation showed you something you didn't know, share it with someone who has never been. And if there is a place in the world whose people you want us to explore next, tell us in the comments below. We will go there. We always do. Subscribe to Tour Guide and explore more, worry less.